Welcome to Fire Engineering Podcasts, where each day you'll hear a variety of voices speaking on timely topics facing the American Fire Service. The best way to keep up with fire engineering is via our free daily e-newsletter. Learn more at fireengineering.com/e-newsletter.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Fire Engineering Talk Radio in another installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. It is Tuesday, April 14th, 2020, and it's Tom Merrill here. And did I say it's Tuesday, April 14th, 2020? Because, wow, what a different world we are living in right now than when I last talked to you a month ago on Tuesday, March 3rd. I think it's fair to say our world has been turned maybe a little bit upside down, maybe a lot upside down, and we are facing unprecedented times, as you well know. And I know there's been a lot of writing and a lot of podcasts and a lot of webinars and a lot of information already conveyed about this COVID virus epidemic and the importance of our departments having good, solid SOPs, SOGs, best practices in place, and that's great. It's the prudent thing to do. I'm not going to spend time going over those because there's so many other people that have already done it, but I think the important thing is that you are obviously doing that as a professional in your organization, and that's ensuring that social distance practices are being adhered to, and you have a plan in place to decon your rigs and your equipment. And I must admit, it's a little weird. No one hanging out at the firehouse. You know, I always like it when people are at the firehouse, and we don't do duty staffing at my firehouse, so we always encourage members to be up there and hanging out, and we make it comfortable, and we give them a lot of things they can do between a nice TV lounge and a fitness center and, you know, free snacks, and we just want them to be hanging out there, and there's nobody there right now, and when there's an alarm and they respond and come back, boom, everybody's gone, and it is weird. It really is weird, and we've canceled our monthly business meeting, and we've hosted probably just like you, hosting a lot of meetings via Zoom. I was in 2 meetings last week via Zoom, or what's the other one called? I already forgot the name of the other one. People are teaching me this new technology. Team, I think it's called, right? Team, yeah. And I was in I'm on a bylaw committee, and we did that via Zoom or Team, and I was on another committee, and we had meetings that way. I must admit, it worked fine. It worked great, but holy cow, something we never would have thought of even just a month ago. And when I look back, my department's just over 100 years old, and there's nothing that stopped us in our tracks in our past 103 years of existence like this has. Heck, not even Pearl Harbor. I was looking. I'm our historian, and I look at our minutes, and I've looked at our minutes at our monthly business meeting was a week after Pearl Harbor, and it went on. I mean, Pearl Harbor didn't even stop us, or 9/11 really didn't stop us. But boy, this virus has changed things and stopped a lot of things in all of our departments, hasn't it? It even stopped the great FDIC. Again, a month ago, you heard me just getting so excited and psyched about going to FDIC again and doing my presentation there. Gosh, it was slated to be next week, and now that's been postponed, and hopefully they're going to be able to get that rescheduled this year. And I must admit, when it was postponed, I wasn't even surprised. I wasn't really even shocked because it really was the right thing to do. No questions about it. I'm not going to criticize that decision, and I heard there's people out there actually criticizing that decision. But why would you? It was the right thing to do. It was such a tough call for Chief Bobby Halton and the crew at Clarion to make, but my gosh, it certainly was the right call. And I hope we're going to be able to see you all at FDIC. They're definitely talking about rescheduling it, maybe in the fall, but we'll see. We'll see. I can't imagine the logistics involved there between vendors and presenters and attendees and all the other people involved. I can't imagine the logistics. But if anybody can do it, Bobby Halton can do it. Diane and Ginger can do it. And all the other people associated with FDIC, they can do it because they're the best in the business. And if we can't do it this year, it's certainly going to stink, but we'll be back next year, stronger and better than ever. I guarantee you that. Who knows when this is going to end? We'll get back to some resemblance of normalcy at some point. Who knows when? But it will happen. We will survive just like America always has. We will persevere, and we will come back strong, both our fire service and our nation, because we're resolute, and that's what we do as Americans. You know, at times like this, I always think of my mother, who doesn't think of their mom when times are tough or you need a little encouragement. She grew up of age during the Great Depression, the late 20s and early 30s, and I can still hear her voice today, 10 years after she passed away and left this world. Her voice still resonates loud and clear, and I can hear her saying, "Thomas, we'll be okay. This country has survived many rough times before. It's not always easy, and it's going to require some sacrifice, but you know what? We will be okay, and we will survive." Unfortunately, some have really sacrificed in a very painful manner. We've lost first responders. We've lost family members of our beloved first responder community, and of course, thousands of fellow Americans, citizens, and others worldwide we've lost to this terrible virus, and it's affected so many people. So many people, and I'd like to extend my heartfelt sympathy, my condolences to all of those affected, and send my best wishes that time will see you in a better way, and that you are at least a little bit comforted knowing that you're in everybody's thoughts and prayers, and we want to just help you get through this rough time for everybody, for so many people. And even throughout these rough times and this crazy pandemic, the calls still continue to come in, don't they? The virus might have stopped a lot of social activities in the firehouse, forced the meetings via Zoom or Team, or maybe even canceling meetings. But you know what? It hasn't stopped the calls from coming in. The last time I checked, Zoom or Team can't put a fire out or render care to a patient who needs medical help. And that's the spirit of the firefighter, that we will continue to answer the call. We will respond, and we will serve our communities honorably, competently, professionally, and we will respond no matter what the obstacles. That's how it's been. That's how it'll always be. Last week, my own department had a pretty decent fire. I actually dispatched it because, again, I work at the alarm office, and I was there when the call came in. You know, actually, it's the second best place to be if you can't actually be at the fire. So this call comes in for a decent bedroom fire. I tone out the department, and I can tell you that this virus didn't stop the firefighters on that day. Out the door they all went. 44 of our active firefighters on this Saturday, out the door, on location within minutes, leaving their homes, their families, to help a community member in need. 44 Snyder firefighters, along with a full complement from 2 neighboring departments, a fast team, and a second alarm assignment. The chief struck a second alarm because he had information that there possibly was at least 1 or 2 victims inside this house. So a second alarm was struck, and in no time at all, over 44 firefighters were on scene. All 100% volunteer members who in a relatively short time had lines stretched, water on the fire, ventilation being performed, and searches underway to verify what was quickly relayed to the incident commander when he arrived on scene, that there was nobody in the house and they were all accounted for. And as I sat there working at the alarm office, I was so proud of the work being done that morning. No yelling on the radio, no unnecessary radio traffic telling people where to park, what line to pull, how to establish a water supply or to get ladders up for the roof. Because as professionals, this is what they train for weekly. This was a bread and butter fire. And we certainly can train and prepare for our bread and butter fires. No, we can't be ready for everything thrown at us, but we certainly can be better prepared and ready for bread and butter fires like this second floor bedroom fire was. Don't all our fire departments, regardless of size, have some vehicle in their apparatus bay that carries water and hose? And what is that for? It's to put out fires, right? So as professionals, that's what we do. We train as professionals to be better prepared. We establish good mutual aid plans with our neighbors who we train with ahead of time and work with ahead of time, so we know who's coming and what they bring. We have a fast team dispatched automatically, and we know who's coming and that they train. And if extra help is needed, the incident commander can simply say, strike a second, strike a third alarm, and not worry about what's coming or where it's coming from because it's been pre-established. That's what professionals do. They train and they prepare, so when it happens, it's just a day at the office. A day at the office that also sees everybody coming home safely and committed to roll out the door again, wherever, whenever needed, no matter what the obstacles might be, because there always will be a need. So hang tough, my friends, and I again want to thank everybody for what they do, and I want to thank Chief Bobby Halton for supporting these podcasts and letting us do these on a regular basis. I want to thank Fire Engineering for supporting us as well, and all the support personnel who make these podcasts happen. And just a couple other housekeeping notes. Hey, I'd like to thank all the public safety dispatchers out there because April 12th to the 18th is National Telecommunicators Week. Yes, I happen to work at the alarm office, so I'm not thanking myself. I want to thank my coworkers and other team members and all the dispatchers nationwide for doing what you do. Truly the first responders out there. Recognize you all for a great job in not always easy conditions, working crazy shifts, dealing with crazy people and crazy events, crazy firefighters and EMS providers, but thank you to all for what you do. And happy National Telecommunicators Week to you all. Also, just an FYI, MSA is partnering with the National Volunteer Fire Council and DuPont again this year. They're providing 52 sets of turnout gear and 52 helmets to departments in need. They're going to select 13 all-volunteer or mostly volunteer departments in the United States and Canada and award each of them with 4 sets of gear and helmets. A lot of information available on the National Volunteer Fire Council website, so I encourage you to go to nvfc.org. That's National Volunteer Fire Council is what it stands for. nvfc.org, or simply Google Globe Gear Giveaway or MSA Globe Gear Giveaway, and you will find more information on that. Also, the grants that are so important to the fire service, the SAFER grant period, has opened and the application process is underway. And I know so many of you out there apply for those, so I thought it was important to remind you of that. Of course, I'm referring to the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response grants. The application period opened yesterday, and it's going to continue through May 15th. If you need information on that, go to the FEMA website, fema.gov, for more information. They're also going to be offering some webinars starting tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow they're going to start some webinars to help navigate the grant process. So go to fema.gov. You'll see a lot of information that can help you navigate the sometimes confusing and troubling grant process. But they stand ready to help you out. And one last piece of housekeeping news, looking ahead to June, you might want to plan for it. There's a firefighter survival safety stand down that they do every year. It's the International Association of Fire Chiefs together with the National Volunteer Fire Council and the Responder Safety Institute. The annual stand down for safety they do every year. In this way, it's dedicated to protecting first responders and EMTs, firefighters, and everybody else who responds on roadways. And we're going to talk more about that on my next show, but you can look ahead for that. Again, more information on safetystandown.org, and you can also find more information on the National Volunteer Firefighters website, as well as the International Association of Fire Chiefs website as well, since they're a co-sponsor. Good stuff. A lot of good stuff going on, and a lot of good stuff going on with this show tonight. And for tonight's show, I wanted to offer something for my more rural volunteer firefighter brother and sisters. We're a product of where we grow up and where we reside, and that's both personally and also in your volunteer fire community as well. And for my area, where I have grown up and lived my entire life, and hence my whole volunteer fire service life as well, has been predominantly suburban bedroom community mix where I live and where I serve. My fire department protects about 20,000 people in a roughly 6 square mile area. As I said, it's a bedroom community filled with a lot of nice single-family dwellings, plenty of strip malls, stores, schools, churches, even colleges. My little section of our town is our little 6 mile square area, part of a bigger 52 square mile town protected by 9 other volunteer fire departments with very similar demographics. There's over 120,000 residents in our town, and with the exception of one small area in our northern section, there really is no rural or farmland character left in my town, which is the town of Amherst, just outside of Buffalo, New York. But as you know, many volunteer fire departments in the United States protect very rural populations. In fact, a large majority of communities, with a population of less than 10,000 are protected wholly by volunteer fire departments. So I know how important it is to talk about rural firefighting operations, maybe discuss some of the unique challenges that are faced by our brothers and sisters in those communities, and that's what I wanted to do. And this year, what kicked me in the butt to finally do this is I've noticed an uptick in a certain type of emergency call, and it might not be an increase officially, but I'm more aware of it because of what I've read with some very real and tragic stories that have been reported on and shared on social media and on the news, in the news sources. It made it stick out to me, and the type of call I'm talking about is grain silo entrapment. I mean, there's been some really, really bad tragedies that have come to light just in the recent past, and I must admit, this is something I really have no experience with, as I don't have a silo in my district, or I don't even think any around, other than in our northern portion of town, have any silos. Heck, we had one barn in my district, and that burned back in 2009. It's gone. We don't even have barns around me anymore. But in my northern section of our town, yeah, we do. We might. But we haven't had a mutual aid run there in my 38 years in the fire service. But I wanted to talk about these types of calls and delve into some, if we had time, some of the challenges of not just these types of calls, but also rural firefighting challenges. So I have some special guests with me this evening that I'm so proud and honored to bring onto the show. I've got Tim Zehnder, I've got Jay Penfield, who are subject matter experts. And gentlemen, I see another caller, and I'm wondering if Chris Moore is going to join us. So if you bear with me for 1 second, let me click in here and see if this is Chris, who's waiting to get on with us. Chris, is that you that was on hold? Hello, Chris, are you there? Or who's the caller here at the 845 area code?
That is Tim Pillsworth, Mr. Tom.
Oh, we got Tim Pillsworth. I didn't recognize your area code, Tim. So if you thank you very much for joining us this evening. We got quite a show lined up with some very special guests. And if you hang on 1 second, Tim, I'm going to get to you to introduce yourself as well, because I know we're also waiting for Chris Moore to call in, I believe. But let me start with Tim Zehnder, and I want Tim to just do a quick intro of his firefighting experience and how he got into the field and what he brings to the table for grain bin and grain silo rescue. Tim, are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
All right. Well, I started my fire service career in 1990 and followed my father in the business, and hit my 30-year anniversary in January, and always been intrigued with training and growing up in rural southern Minnesota, I really really had a passion for the rescue side of things. And honestly, this whole grain bin rescue training prop thing came from my father, and he's like, hey, I think we can do this. So we built a grain bin on a trailer and started teaching people, teaching firefighters how to rescue people out of grain bins. And so as my career evolved, I spent 21 and a half years with the Truman Fire and Rescue in southern Minnesota and held every position from firefighter to chief, and then took a job at Mid-Plains Community College out here in southwest corner of Nebraska. And I'm the director of the fire science program. And when I got here, no one was talking about grain bin safety and rescue. And I thought, well, this is kind of strange. So I went to our administration and said, hey, if we're going to do this, this is what we need to do. And they were super, super supportive. And so we built a trailer out here, and we've done training all across Nebraska and Colorado and Wyoming, and we can bring it to you. You know, it's not people, and I don't want to sound, it's not people being dumb. It's people doing what they've done for years and years and years and never getting caught.
Yeah,
and
I can
so,
understand that.
You know, and in the last year, we have taken our training program to the producer level, below the fire service, and taken it out to the producer level with the local co-ops saying, hey, if you guys don't get caught, we don't have to rescue you. And that's gone off really, really well, and had a lot of people jump on board going, wow, this is really important. We never thought about this. And so it's gone really, really well.
It's gone full cycle,
so yeah,
which is awesome. You know, that's awesome. And if I may say too, you also co-authored the grain bin rescue video for Fire Engineering Books and Videos, did you not?
Yep. Jay and I, Fire Engineering came to me about 5 years ago and said, hey, we'd like you to do a video. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Honestly, said, I'm a small town kid. What do I want to write a book or do a video for? And they're like, no, you should do that. And one thing led to another, and they said, so we're filming in December, huh? And I said, okay, fine, I guess we are. And
they knew the right guy to bring in.
I called Jay and said, Jay and I taught together quite a bit in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and I said, hey, buddy, this is what's going to happen. I need you to be in McCook, Nebraska for 3 days. And he's like, for what? I said, we're producing a video. So, and the rest is history, I guess. So the video's been out for, right now will be 3 years, and it was pretty nerve-wracking, and there was a lot of work went into it, but it was one of the funnest things I ever did in my life, and I'm glad we were able to share our thoughts and you know.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you know, if I may tell the group too, nobody wears a cowboy hat better than Tim Zehnder, and I was so honored to be able to wear the hat when I was in Nebraska back in early February for the Les Luker Conference. And you know, being from Buffalo, New York, I love cowboy hats, but I don't get a chance to wear them too often. So, and I even own a couple Stetsons, believe it or not. But I was honored to be able to wear it. Yours is a little big on me though, but no, my cowboy hat wearing buddy, you bring a lot of great information and wealth to the table, and I can't wait to talk to you more about it in just a bit here. And also your coworker Jay, are you there? And can you tell us a little bit about what brought you in to the fire service, the rescue service, how you got involved in this type of unique rescue challenge.
Well, thanks for having me on, Tom. I appreciate it. I started with our local ambulance service, and at the time the ambulance service did the rescue. I am a volunteer firefighter currently, a captain with the Hudson, Wisconsin Fire Department. I started with the EMS and rescue department and progressed through, your standard auto extrication stuff, and that was really interesting. I really dug that and started to dig into it quite a bit. We ended up starting a rope rescue program, got into confined space types of things. I joined the fire department in 2003. Rescue is fully transferred over to the fire department at this point. EMS got busy. They go paramedic. There's a lot of work to be done on the EMS side. So rescue was a natural fit for the fire department, and I've been with those guys since 2003. I also quit my office job in 2013 and started doing fire rescue training and OSHA-type safety training full-time, and we do emergency response. We do standby work, most specifically confined space standby work. We do hazmat spill response. We do a lot of training, a lot of the OSHA topics, a lot of fire rescue topics. So right from the start, when I got involved, it was very interesting. It was very dynamic. I really enjoyed it. I got thrown in with Tim Zehnder kind of at an odd place. We were both working at a fire conference in Wisconsin, and Tim's class, he was doing a grain bin class, had his trailer up here, and the class was getting big, and he needed some help, so they knew I was a confined space guy and a rope rescue guy, and they said, well, why don't you go help with this class? So I walked in, I met Tim, we taught the class, and we've been teaching together ever since. We just really clicked, and the way that he and I think and talk and present really works well together, and we've kind of traveled the country doing a lot of different stuff, and primarily a lot of the grain bin rescue stuff, which, like you mentioned, Tom, it is kind of big news now, which is really unfortunate because it wouldn't be big news if we weren't having issues and we weren't making headlines with some of the unfortunate incidents that occur. I talked to a lady from Minnesota who was really digging hard on some legislation to try to help fix some of the problems that create these grain bin incidents. I talked to her. She lost her son in a grain bin incident, and she's working on legislation. It's really a hot topic right now. I'm really excited that you're putting it out there. It's just one of those things that seems like more knowledge is certainly going to help. I don't know if it's going to fix it because, like Tim mentioned, people are just doing what they've done for, hundreds of years. And I teach grain bin classes, and I'll ask people in the room, raise your hand if you've ever been inside a grain bin, and half the crowd puts their hand up, and they don't think anything of it. So we're just got to try to educate people and train them and make this easy and understandable and hopefully reduce some of the incidents we're getting.
Yeah, and, it's funny because I must admit, I shouldn't say it's funny. I don't mean that's a bad choice of words, but the closest I can come to knowing anything about this issue, I first learned about from the movie Witness. There's the famous scene in that movie with Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis. I don't know if you guys even remember that movie. Famous scene where the villain, villain dies in it when he gets engulfed by grain or corn, something in a silo, and I'm like, oh my God, that movie's 20 plus years old, but I remember seeing that thinking that's got to be a horrible way to go, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I wonder how you would deal with that in the emergency services setting. So as I said at the beginning, that was my first introduction, but I've noticed a huge uptick this year in over the past year in cases of these tragedies, and I don't know if it's happening more or it's just we're more aware of it, but some of the numbers I've seen, and maybe you even have better numbers, I'm seeing 19 deaths from grain engulfment since August alone. That's August of 2019 alone, and digging into it a little bit more, 27 people died in 2018 and 370 grain entrapment emergencies in the last 10 years. And Tim, or Jay, I don't know who wants to take this, but is it true, too, that we're not just talking adults? There's a lot of children or young adults that are being killed and horribly injured as well, correct?
Jay, I'll grab this quick. Yeah, it's been crazy. There's been, since the notes I jotted down here, since May 16th until January 14th, I was putting some notes together for a class that we did before we got quarantined. In that time period, I had 19 deaths. There was 26 events, and the youngest person to die was 11 years old. And in that deal, it was December 21st, and that happened in Millerville, Minnesota. His dad passed away and his uncle passed away. And that was actually in a concrete silo due to gas. And unfortunately, the dad and the brother were both firefighters for the local volunteer fire department.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's cases as young as 9 that I have recorded in my deals or in my notes. 9 years old, saw a dad chipping feed out of a feed tank, and the feed didn't come out the bottom, so he crawled up there and jumped in, and it was caked along the side, and it covered him. And 9 years old, and he passed away. So
oh, wow, it's horrible.
It doesn't matter your age. One of the latest ones that I've seen, the gentleman was 74 years old, and got caught in a bin. And I guess, I don't know if you want me to run with this right now, Tom, but part of the problem is the weather we had last year with the horrible fall, all the moisture. You know, people were trying to get their crops out, and I totally get it. You know, growing up as a farm kid, it's hard. But at the end of the day, there were guys putting corn in bins anywhere from 19 to 22% moisture. Well, what happens is when it gets cold, it freezes around the outside because obviously they're in a metal bin, and the product freezes and it won't go, flow towards the auger. So they try to go in and chip it loose so it'll flow out so they can haul it to town and deliver it to the elevator, and it won't go. So they go inside and start chipping it loose, and gravity takes effect, and they end up in the hole.
Wow.
So it's a tough deal.
Yeah, it sure is. And, I got a question, Jay, if I'm going to ask this right off the bat, and this just shows how naive I am, and educate me, because as I like to do research and read about the shows I'm going to do, plus this topic, when these incidents were happening, I would read more about it. Is a silo and a bin the same thing? I see grain silo and I see grain bin. Is that the same thing?
Well, they're really just different types of vessels, different types of products. At the end of the day, they're all confined spaces. And I say this in the video we've done and in the classes that I do. If you treat these things as though they're confined spaces, which they are, you're not going to have a problem because you're going to do all the right things. So the type of vessel, changes to some degree what we might have problems with. The incident that Tim mentioned where the uncle and the dad and the kid all passed away was more from a gas situation, meaning the product in there was creating an environment that wasn't survivable. It's a little different than an engulfment type scenario with a grain bin or a corn bin, but yes, those vessels are different, and they pose different types of challenges and different types of dangers, but it's kind of the same thing. It's the same problems with no training, no air monitoring, not doing the right things and going in there and having issues.
Yeah. So what type of material traditionally is kept in these bins? I keep saying corn, and I think most people think corn, but is there other types of material that the farmers and ranchers are keeping in these bins that can get us in trouble?
Tim, you want to take that? You spend, I think, almost every evening crawling around looking at different types of bins.
Yeah, they're going to store corn, but they're going to store soybeans, wheat, barley. All depends on what part of the country you're in. Talking to our firefighter brothers and sisters in Canada, their big thing is canola, and they're having the same issues. So it doesn't matter what the product is. If it goes in there too wet, you're going to get that moisture problem and the spoilage, if you will, and maybe the mold even, that will create the crust. And there's been cases where bins have crusted completely over in the entire size of the bin, and they go in and it's rock solid. You can walk across it, and 40, 50, 60 feet in the air, there's nothing below it but this crusted shelf of grain, and there's nothing below it. It crusts that hard.
Wow. So what other types of things happen for these incidents? Like, what causes people? I know sometimes the grain gets stuck and they want to dislodge it. Is there such a thing as, I saw a term, walking the grain? What causes people to get into these predicaments? Is there a few main things you concentrate on when you want to educate people about, hey, don't do this, because this is what we have seen that has caused people to get engulfed by the grain or the oats or the soybeans or whatever it is?
Right. Well, at the end of the day, it's when the auger doesn't flow anymore, and there's a big auger at the bottom of these bins, and when they take it out of the bin and dump it in the semi or the truck to haul it to town, and it's not flowing, they climb to the top, look in, and go, oh, there's a big chunk clogging the auger. So somehow they have to get that out of there, and unfortunately, most of the time they take a chunk of conduit or a rod of some sort or whatever it is, and they hit this, but they're on the grain. And one thing that I try to express to the farming and ranching community is gravity's gravity, no matter who you are. So if you take it out of the bottom and you're standing on the top, you're going to end up at the bottom. And they try to get that in there and, break it loose, and eventually they're going to end up underneath it. But again, I fall back to what I said. We've done this for 100 years and we've never got caught. Well, unfortunately, now people are getting caught. And like you said, Tom, I don't know if we're hearing about it more or people are explaining it more, but we have people that are ending up in this situation, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
I was looking at the list in front of me here, and it's not, and obviously it's weird, it's all the Midwest, but Michigan, Ohio, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, North Dakota, it's the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana. It's the Midwest where 90% of this stuff happens. And it's not at your typical local co-op. It's happening on the family farm.
Yeah.
And a caveat to that would be the average American farmer today in April of 2020 is 58 years old. So think about that number. Our farming and ranching community isn't getting younger. They're getting older. And they never retire.
All this mirrors the fire service.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, where I'm at in southwest Nebraska, a lot of the farmers and ranchers out here are also volunteer firefighters that have to respond to these things. And you start getting into the equipment that you need and, that kind of thing. They don't have the budgets to support that,
Right.
I've been in this business 30 years and been a volunteer the entire time. Jay's the same way. You're the same way. I mean, it is what it is. But you don't have the budgets to have the equipment.
You know what else you said that mirrors the volunteer fire service or the fire service in general is we've done it this way for 100 years and never gotten in trouble before. So there's two things there that mirror the fire service. We've always done it that way, and the average age is certainly increasing. And I had mentioned that term, walking down the grain, and I know from what I read that's actually outlawed in large commercial facilities. But what exactly does that mean? Does that mean someone is standing on top, and as the grain is coming out the bottom, they're just writing it down?
Pretty much. Yep.
And what would they do that? What would a farmer or an agricultural worker in their right mind, what would say, oh, this is fine, I'm not going to get in trouble? Why are they doing that? Why do they need to write it down in their mind?
Because that's what Grandpa taught me to do. And Grandpa wasn't wrong. Grandpa lived a great life. But at the end of the day, it's got to flow, and you got to get the grain from the sides to the bottom, right? And how are you going to do that without pushing it down? And nobody puts a harness on, nobody puts a rope on, and nobody has that lookout at the hole. So eventually, all of a sudden, now we got somebody trapped. And now, one thing I said the other day, I was talking with some guys from a giant feedlot, and we were supposed to do a class for them, 2 classes last week before the coronavirus hit. And I said, you guys are out here. This is all the way it is. What do you do when you get a clog? Well, we go in there and break it up. Okay. I said, why don't you have somebody outside the door, and why don't you have a harness on? And why don't you have a rope tied to it? Well, I guess I never thought about it. But,
so awareness is a big part of your education.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Tom. I mean, Jay and I talk about this all the time, is anytime you go to a confined space in all our careers, what do we think about ahead of time? Okay, you got to have a tagline, you got to have this, you got to have somebody monitor the door, you got to do this and this and this. Because we've thought about it. Jay, and you might want to jump in here a little too with that confined space side, but these guys don't think about it.
Well, Jay, so just to review quickly, so there's several ways that people get in this predicament. Walking down the grain, because that's how they've always done it, and it probably feels kind of cool as it's going down, and they're riding down with it. So, Grandpa showed them how to do it, so they're doing that. They may enter the grain storage facility because of the damp, clumped grain, right? It's stuck on the walls, so they go in there to pull it away from the walls, and all of a sudden, boom, it comes down on them. Trying to dislodge the auger, right? That can lead to problems too. So the awareness of any reason at all that you've got to be working under or above or in these silos, you got to have a spotter. You got to have a body harness or a safety line of some type. But we'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes. Jay, tell me, if you could, what happens when it happens? I hear it happens really fast, and people think they're going to have time to react, but once this grain starts moving or whatever the product is, they don't have time, correct?
Yeah, it happens really fast, Tom. And if the auger is running, it happens incredibly fast. So you've got, a bin filled with corn, grain, whatever, and there's an auger pulling it out from the bottom. If you've got a heavy object in there, like a body, it pulls it to the bottom extremely quickly. And then not only are you in jeopardy of suffocation, but you're in jeopardy of getting into the auger because it pulls you straight to it. If the auger isn't running, you still are going to be heavier than the objects around you. And the way that these bins pull that material out, it generally pulls from the center, so it's lower in the center when you go in there. All that other grain is sliding up the sides or sitting up on those sides waiting to kind of slide down on top of you. So it happens extremely quickly. And once it starts to happen, it really is like quicksand in the fact that the more you struggle, the faster you sink. And depending on what level you sink to, even as little as is getting to your waist, you may not be able to get out. So even if you're not covered completely and suffocated, you're trapped in there. And much like Tim mentioned, you don't have anybody watching you. You don't have anybody that's out there going, uh-oh, we got a problem. It's, hey, it's dinner time and Bobby never came in. I wonder where he's at. And then spend 2 hours looking for him before you find him in there. And hopefully he's still above the grain and able to breathe. But unfortunately, these things lend themselves to being trapped for a long period of time before anybody realizes it. We pulled a guy. I was on a call in the area here in Wisconsin where he was buried up about not quite to his rib cage, but close. And he said
this the wingtip?
It felt
was
like
this the wingtip call?
Yeah, yeah, I was. Tim mentions that. It's funny because I went straight from work and I had on dress pants and wingtip shoes and the whole works, and I was in the grain bin helping with this rescue with these stupid dress clothes on. But this guy said it was like concrete. He said I could not move a muscle. He said I couldn't move my feet. I couldn't do anything. And he was fortunate in the fact that he had one of the little portable radios on him, and he was able to call his kid, who, of course, immediately went into the bin to try to pull him out. He wasn't able to do it, and he didn't become trapped himself. He was able to call for help. Fire rescue shows up, multiple responding agencies, mutual aid, et cetera, and we were able to get him out of there, and he was fine. But he said it was concrete, and he wasn't fully buried.
Mm. What happens then? Does it compress on your chest, or I know obviously you can get buried, and you end up breathing the product in. I know the vapors can get you, but is there also a problem or a danger of the pressure compressing on your chest? Is that also? I mean, it looks like there's a lot of different things that can go bad here.
Yeah, that's really what it is. It's the traumatic asphyxiation. So you've got that product pushing in on your chest, and every time you exhale, that product comes in a little tighter. And it just becomes the point where you cannot expand your chest walls any longer to exchange air. Even though your head's above it, and the air quality may be good, you've got that pressure on your chest and you can't exchange air anymore, and that's it.
Yeah, and
Tom,
I think I read too that some of these people look like it's blunt force trauma.
Yeah, because talking to my paramedic folks, I was an EMT for 22 years, but doing some investigation on this with my paramedic friends, you end up with crush syndrome or compartment syndrome, because at the end of the day, there's so much pressure, it pushes all the blood up into the top part of your body, and you dig the person out, and all of a sudden, all that blood drops to the bottom. The toxins roll through there and can cause quite the, it can kill you. Even if you survive it, they pull them out, and you get that compartment syndrome where all the toxins in the blood are pushed up, and there's nothing in your legs or your lower abdomen, and all of a sudden, everything hits. It's bad juju, and can be horrible.
Wow. Hey guys, just hang on one sec. I got a caller, and I'm wondering. Chris was having trouble getting through, and I'm wondering if he just maybe got through now. So let me just see if this is Chris. Chris, are you with us? Is that you?
Yes, Tom.
Hey, it worked. We finally got you.
Hey.
He was messaging me that he was having trouble getting through, and I'm glad we finally were able to make you connect with us. And welcome to the show, my friend. We've got a good discussion going on. If you want to just quickly introduce yourself to the listening audience, and welcome aboard.
Okay, my name's Chris Moore. I'm over here in Nebraska. It's the small town of Sutton. We're about 1,500 people. I've been working with Tim with the Grain Bin Rescue for about 3 years. Member of our local fire department since 1992. Been at every office up to chief, and really enjoying it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to be on here. And we've been talking about, obviously, awareness is huge with these incidents, and letting the agricultural workers and your farmers and ranchers and everyone be more aware that, hey, just because Grandpa did it that way, maybe we should rethink things. And is there anything you want to add to the message on being aware, and also what happens and how fast it happens, these incidents, and how they unfold?
Yeah, you betcha.
Chris, Chris,
they've made some... Yes, Tim.
Hang on,
before
Tim.
You get started, Chris, let them know what kind of operation that you work for.
Okay.
As far as your grain storage and what you have on farm.
Okay. I work for what we consider around here kind of your average farm, or a little bit bigger than average. I know, Tom, you made the comment earlier in the show that your fire district was 6 square miles. Well, we farm almost twice that. So
man.
if you can picture twice your fire district in 36-inch rows, that's kind of what we're dealing with here. We have currently right at 500,000 bushel storage, and we're doing another bin project now, which we're putting up another leg and another bin. 2 of those bins are 200,000 bushel bins, and next one will be 140,000 roughly, depending on how full it gets. And then they go down to 50,000, down, as small as 6. So depending on what our overruns for whatever crop we are harvesting entails. So that's kind of the rundown on our farm, in a nutshell.
So would you say that, yes, people better darn well be aware of what they're getting involved with, and it's just like the fire service, right? We've gone to hundreds of fires, or always done it this way, but it can get you. It can get you.
The thing about it is we've always done it this way, but as you know, everything in the world is getting bigger, and that's no different than the typical farm. The bins used to be 6,000 bushel, and now, like I said, we're talking about bins that are holding 50,000, 200,000, 750,000 bushel. I mean, we're talking about massive structures here, and there's a lot more room for problems when you get into structures that big.
Yeah, for sure.
You know.
So,
go ahead, Tom.
No, I was going to go ahead with what you got. That's fine.
You know, when we're talking about bins that are this big, and like I said, your accidents are happening, you know, in all kinds of bins. But the problem with what we're doing today is, you know, we have to get the job done, okay? And it doesn't matter what happens as far as if it's the farm or the elevator or anything else. You know, we go from field to field, and not all the moistures are the same, okay? So you may get, typically, grain in a bin needs to be around that 14-15% moisture to store well. So who's to say that you go on the ends where you're picking the end of the field off, which is typically a little bit wetter than the middle of the field, so now you have a semi-load or two that go into the bin that are a little bit wetter. Now you have a pocket that's inside the middle of the bin. So, you know, and that's where you get the hole when you're moving grain out from the bottom. That bridge in the middle of the bin is created by that little bit of wet corn that may have ended up in the middle of the bin. And when you force air through the bottom, from the bottom up, which typically most of them do, you don't get the air to flow through that wet spot, and it creates a crust, and it gets hard. Okay, so when it gets the crust, so depending on where that is in the bin, you know, if you're withdrawing it, and it happens to be fairly close to the top of the bin, it will support the weight. And then that is what causes, you know, the collapse in the middle. All of a sudden there's that air pocket in the middle because you've pulled the grain out from underneath and the weight is being supported by that crust above it.
And you have no way of knowing that? You can't see it? You just think it's fine?
You know, the only rule, I mean, honestly, there's no fail-safe way to see it. I mean, you can be withdrawing grain, go up to the top, look in the manhole, and you can see grain moving. But is there a pocket that you don't know about?
Right.
I mean, honestly, if you go in from the top and you look and you've been pulling loads out and there's no reverse V going down towards the middle of the bin, you know there's a problem. Right. Or maybe it's withdrawing from one side and sliding over to the middle, then you'll know there's a problem. But that's not always 100% accurate. Oof. You know, you really, even at our farm, especially in the last 5-6 years, we've gone to a no entry. Once we started pulling out of the bottom, nobody goes in the top, and you just look. You don't go in. But that comes with the bigger bins. I mean, let's face it, you fall in a hole in a 200,000 bushel bin. I mean, it's scary to think what might happen.
It sure is. It sure is. If I could just take a quick break just to remind the listeners that this is Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio, tonight's installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And I really appreciate our listeners listening in on this very important topic, a great topic, a topic that, my gosh, has certainly been in the news quite a bit lately. And I really want to thank my guests for giving us such great information, Tim Zehnder, Jay Penfield, and now Chris Moore joining us. So guys, this happens for the reasons we've talked about, lack of awareness, and the other reasons people think they got to dislodge the auger or walk the grain down or whatever their reason is for doing what they're doing, but they did it incorrectly or something bad happened. Now they're trapped and boop, boop, fire rescue is alerted. As first responders, could you, I don't know if one of you wants to take this. I don't want to pick one of you if someone else is more happy to do it, but what steps do we want to impress upon our first responders that are out there that have these silos and bins and potential for these type of emergencies, maybe not even in their district, but a neighboring district? What are their first steps? How do we work to get somebody free from one of these events? And if I may, the good news in my studies is, see, I do a little research because I like to know what I'm going to talk about, and this impressed me. I read before 2005, a quarter of the victims trapped were saved. Since 2005, that rate has improved to a half. So progress, it appears, is being made. We may not be making progress on the awareness end and people getting in these situations, but it looks like fire rescue and first responders are doing a better job. Can you, one of you, want to take this or work together? What steps should we be taking if we're alerted to an incident like this? Did I just pick one of you?
Tim, I
Go
think
ahead,
you
Tim.
might be
Tim,
the better
go for it.
one for the overall, picture here.
Did we lose
Maybe
Tim?
we lost Tim.
Tim, are you there?
Well,
All
then
right.
I'll take it.
Jake,
and
go
and
for
Chris,
it, Jake.
Chris, feel free as well. Your knowledge of the working farm is far deeper than mine is. I've never worked on a farm, and I don't know a lot of the things that you know. So that'll be great to work with you on this.
You betcha.
From the fire rescue side, we're looking at approaching this just like a confined space call, and I keep going back to that because really it's the exact same thing. We want to do all the same types of things, and if we are going to go rescue somebody, we should be filling out a confined space permit. Now, that permit is really just a checklist to make sure that we do all the things we're supposed to do. Includes things like air monitoring, includes things like lockout, tagout. You want to ensure that we're not going to injure or kill any rescuers trying to go into this. And just like Tim mentioned with the folks in Minnesota, one person goes in and goes down, and then we lose a couple more trying to go rescue them because we're not doing the right things. Even if it's an engulfment, that person was up and walking and talking and just fine, went in the grain bin to do whatever they had to do, got buried. If we don't take some steps, we're going to have that same fate, or we absolutely could. We tend to forget that because we want to help. As human beings, we're driven to try to help somebody who's in that situation. And to be honest, even worse, when we're in the fire rescue business and we're these professional volunteer firefighters, we really feel like everybody's looking at us to pull off this rescue. And so now we're really anxious to try to do that. And if we miss steps, they could be fatal. So, treating it as a confined space, going through your confined space permit to enter, start checking all the boxes, and we don't forget the things that we're supposed to do. So as we arrive, these incidents, okay, this is going to be, just like any other technical rescue incident. So they're extremely manpower dependent, equipment dependent, specialized training dependent, mutual aid dependent. There's a lot going on here. We may be somewhat dependent on the agriculture industry to assist us with things like augers and unloaders. So these are big incidents, and they are time-consuming incidents. And we've got to really establish a strong incident command system. We need to start checking all of our boxes, start getting our resources, and start ensuring that we're doing the right thing so we don't injure or kill anybody else.
And this might be a situation where, as an incident commander, and you hear about this all the time in your leadership training classes, and a good incident commander and chief knows this might be out of your area of expertise, and you might have to ditch your ego a little bit and rely on the expertise of some other people, whether it's within your own department and organization or you bring in outside help, because you really got to know what you're doing here. And what you're talking about right here, Jay, sounds like you need a lot. It's people power intensive, and you need strong incident command, even if strong incident command dictates you take the advice and guidance of some outside sources.
No,
Well, you're right, Tom. The ego is really a big challenge for us in the fire industry. We like to think that we know what we are supposed to do all the time, and in a lot of cases, that is step back and start taking advice from people who are subject matter experts. But we don't like to do that.
Yeah. And I
Tim,
think
I'm
I have
sorry,
Tim
I
back in now. I think Tim is back with us. Tim, so we're alerted to respond to these incidents. Incident commander is establishing a good command post. He's got solid control over who's coming into the scene. They're starting their confined space checklist, doing a permit confined space to ensure lockout tagout procedures are followed. Air monitoring's going on because, again, that's a problem right there with the damage to the central nervous system or whatever these fumes can do to people. What else are our responders, what steps should they be going through to try to rescue this poor individual or individuals trapped in these bins and silos?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep, you're with us.
Oh, I got back. Sorry about that. I don't know
That's
if
all right.
I hit the wrong button or what happened, but I think to go off of what Jay said, unfortunately, 90% of these cases happen in rural America. And what you said earlier, Tom, about fire department gets called and they show up, even if they don't know what they're doing. And that's okay because that's not something in their wheelhouse. You've got to rely on your mutual aid departments. You've got to rely on someone else. There's been cases where over 100 firefighters showed up to get one person out of a bin, and it took them over 8 hours. That's a very unique rescue,
Yep.
So,
what would you recommend if the first responding agency or agencies aren't up to the task? In other words, they're not equipped, they're not trained. What steps should they at least be taking until the higher trained authorities get there?
don't let anybody in the bin to start with, because the more people you put in the bin, the worse it's going to be, because as soon as someone hits that grain surface, it's going to push more grain on top of them. But honestly, with the group that we have on the radio tonight, it's all about mutual aid. Someone in your mutual aid group is rope savvy. Okay? That's the first thing. Find out who that is and get them coming. The second thing is, in my career, I never ever thought that I would pre-plan a grain bin site, because it was always the local co-op growing up. Where I grew up in Minnesota, there are 3 farms that I know of, family farms, that have bigger grain operations and storage than what our local co-op did. We pre-planned that because that was part of their insurance thing. And we got to talking and said, maybe we should go out and see some of these other places. Pre-plan it. Figure out what's where. Figure out where your shutoffs are. Figure out, how to access these places. At the end of the day, you got to understand how these operations work before you can put anybody on them,
Yeah.
And Chris, your operation is one of them. That was unheard of to have that much grain storage at a family farm growing up. Our elevator didn't have that much storage.
Yeah. I think I'll take even a step back a little bit further than that on first due responding. I mean, you're probably, one of your biggest goals would be find somebody that knows the site. If there's somebody around that, you know, obviously somebody made the call, somebody knows where the power switches are, somebody knows where all that stuff is, and get everything shut off. Because more times out of that, hopefully there's not an auger running or a truck sitting there that's overflowing, because if that's the case, then the outcome is bleak. You know, we need to find somebody to get everything shut off. Now, you know, a first due responder, you can go up on top, look in the door. Can you see them? Can you not? If you can see them, find them a rope, something, throw it down to them. You know, tell them to tie it around their armpits. You know, wrap it around them, tie them off, try and keep them from going down any farther. I think that would probably be one of the first main things to do, you know, outside of checking air quality inside the bin, things like that. But let's get a rope on them. Hopefully they won't sink down any farther. But like I said, if you can't see them, the outcome is probably not good.
Correct.
Yeah, and then in that case, you have to prevent what we've seen happen so often in confined space type incidents underground, where firefighters or rescuers just plunge down to get somebody, not aware of the danger that to themselves, whether it's fumes or, in this case, the fumes, or they get engulfed, right? So it really takes a lot of self-control and strong incident command, especially if you have family members yelling and screaming, and it's obviously a chaotic situation.
Absolutely.
Tom, I'm going to jump in real quick. Sorry to cut you guys off, but one of the things that I talked to chiefs and commanders about is you can walk up to a structure fire and you can do your 360 and you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on. You come to a grain bin incident and you do your 360, and two things are always the same. It's silver and it's round. And you have no clue what's going on inside. So you need to put somebody on top of that bin that can look down inside and see what's going on, that will be able to relay to you, what are we dealing with?
Yep.
Right. And then another hazard is, you talked about the moisture and in the bins, and isn't there a danger sometimes with low temperatures or risk of hypothermia with these victims?
Well, hyperthermia or hypothermia depends on what time of year it is. You know, and Chris can probably speak more to this, but summertime it's well over 100 degrees in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, temperature is a big thing. Typically in the fall when we fill the bins after harvest, our biggest goal is to cool them down as cold as we can get. So usually the fans will run, you know, right away, obviously, to try and get what moisture is in there out as much as we can. And then when the temperature really turns cold, usually around that freezing point, we'll run fans again, because we want to cool that grain down as much as possible, because it will store better over the winter when it's cold. Now that causes two problems in the spring. Now you have cold grain and warm on the outside edges, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because now you've got condensation because you have warm and cold together. So one of the things we've done on our farm to combat that is our fans are all controlled by thermostats. So we set the grain at a certain temperature, and the fans kick on and off over the course of the day or the month or whatever, for however long the grain's in storage, to keep it at a constant temperature. So there's actually temperature probes that run in about 8 or 9 different areas of the bin that run from the top to the bottom. So if there happens to be a warm spot inside that bin during the winter, the fans will kick on and cool it back down. To try to keep that spoilage down to a minimum.
And Jay, are you with me, Jay?
Yes, sir.
Is Jay with us? Okay, I was just going to say, Jay, couldn't I'm a rescuer, I respond. What's my chances of throwing a rope down to someone that's, say, engulfed up to their waist or even their chest and being able to pull them out? There's a lot of people think, wow, we'll just throw a rope at them and pull them out. Are they going to have much luck with that, or is the friction too much to overcome in most cases?
The friction is absolutely too much to overcome. You want to get a rope on them. Number one, you want to make sure that they're not going to sink any farther, or if they happen to sink, you want to be able to find them. But you cannot pull them out. The guy that I mentioned earlier, we actually had a rope on him and had a little mechanical advantage to try to just give him a little help, and absolutely not. He said, I didn't move an inch. You are not going to simply attach a rope to somebody and pull them out. I guess it depends how deep they're buried, the consistency of the product, et cetera. But if you're up to the waist or better, there's no shot. What you have to do is get the product away from them. And that's partially that's partially why we're seeing some successes here. Is there's some very specific products, grain rescue tubes, that you can get around people very quickly and efficiently and dig them out. So that's not only training and education is lending itself to fire departments being successful, but some of these products that are in the cache of equipment for these rescues is helping that as well.
That's excellent, Jay. It's a great segue into the next section then. So we talked about the importance of pre-planning. Hear about that all the time in the fire service. Know your districts. Well, people, if you have these types of silos and bins in your district or neighboring district, pre-plan ahead of time what you're going to do if you get an event at one of those emergencies or are called in to assist at one of these emergencies. Understand it's a confined space event, and a permit needs to be filled out, and very strong incident command needs to be in charge, and you have to monitor the air, and someone's got to see if they can get eyes on the victim or victims, and if you can get at least a rope down to them or a harness to prevent them from sinking any more, if at all possible. Be aware of the temperature extremes. Again, so many people are going to be needed. Tim, or Jay, what then? We've got that. We've got our victim secured. He's not sinking anymore. We've got still a lot of work to do. What tools are out there? What assistance is available to us? What has been contributing to the more recent success stories for getting people out? What type of training should we be doing, and what type of tools and appliances are out there to help us out?
So that's a great question. So specifically as it pertains to getting, there's a couple things going on here. You've got to have people who are trained to enter the bin, go in and do that, and start to create a space around the victim. Whether you're doing it with plywood, with backboards, we're creating a coffer dam around this victim, and we have to create this dam around them before we can start removing product. If we just start removing product, we're generally going to get more product flowing in and filling that space just about as quickly as we can get it out of there. So we've got to create some type of barrier to that product coming in on that victim. Once we create that barrier, then we can start removing product, and then we can start to actually get the person out. And again, that can be with all kinds of different things. But think about this. So if you're going to create a space around this victim, and let's say we're going to use plywood, and we actually did this on a call, how big of pieces of plywood can we get inside that bin?
And how do you get it down to them if he's 20 feet or 30 feet down?
Right. The hole that you have to slide it through is probably 20 inches. Chris, what's the typical access holes for bins?
Yeah, a typical is probably 15, 18 inches wide and maybe 25 inches long. I mean, it's not typically a very big hole. If you weigh 250, 300 pounds, you're going to have a hard time getting in the hole. Let's just say that.
Well, and that means whatever product we're going to put in there to create this space around our victim has to be that size. So you're cutting plywood sheets into 20-inch strips and trying to then build this around them. The grain rescue tubes that I mentioned are designed to be that size, slide together very easily and create a space around that victim. And those things have been pretty slick, and a lot of fire departments have those.
You betcha.
And what's kind of cool is they're not only getting some of this specialized equipment, they're also getting training on how to use it. One of the other pieces to this puzzle is you're going to need to then get them up and out of the bin and down to the ground. And the only way to really do that is going to be with a technical rope team. And that is another challenge here, because training somebody to get a cofferdam built and get somebody out of the grain really isn't that challenging or time-consuming. The problem is all the other stuff that goes with it, the confined space training, the high-angle rescue training, et cetera, to be able to then get somebody safely up and out of there is fairly substantial, and a lot of departments don't go to quite that level. But they typically have somebody in their area, even if it's an hour away, that can come and assist with that.
Wow, there's a lot that goes into that, isn't there? Tim, is there anything else you've seen in your training or in tools and appliances that you've noticed that have helped?
Well, I think the evolution of the grain rescue tube has been amazing, and also the ability to have a grain rescue auger, which has been really, really neat. Will fit down inside of the rescue tube, and it operates with a cordless drill, and be able to auger out the product inside the tube once you have it around the victim. All that stuff's great, but the thing that everybody has to remember is if this person isn't straight up and down, it's not going to work, because the grain rescue tube is round. And if they're horizontal, you're not going to make this work. So you're going to have to use other things. I mean, it's just like a tool in your toolbox, you know. And the other thing I wanted to add to this, Tom, is departments have to realize it's not just the guy caught in the bottom of the bin. It could be somebody that, you know, broke their arm or had a heart issue or a stroke or some kind of medical situation on top of the bin. How are you going to get them down? Mm-hmm. And that's, like Jay said, where your mutual aid departments having the rope savvy people to be able to come and help make that happen. And it's a pretty intense operation.
Okay. Tim, can I add something to that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Let's not forget that, you know, even on a steel structure grain bin, they're built-in sheets that are usually 2 foot by 3.5 to 4 foot long, and they're curved. Now, depending on obviously where the grain level is inside the silo or bin, you can pull one of those sheets out.
True story.
That is an option. You can pull one of those sheets out of that bin and not compromise the strength of the structure. Just unbolt it or cut you a hole inside it. Don't cut any bolt patterns. Just cut a hole inside that sheet, and you can come right out the side at the grain level. That is an option, and it's not always an option, but it's there. You know, so you can make access a little farther down so you're not quite so high up or whatever works best for the situation, but that is also an option.
Chris, do you have to be worried if you're cutting? Is there an explosive concern?
Typically no, because usually by this time there's not a whole lot of dust involved, and it's not suspended. There may be some dust there, but it's usually not suspended. What you really have to be concerned about is dust that's suspended in the air, and you'll know. I mean, If it's super thick, obviously that is an issue. I mean, we've done it. I've cut holes in grain bins that were full, because the center sump is plugged and we can't get anything to come out the center, so we'll cut a hole in the door or something and stick an auger in the side and come through that, and I've done that with a torch. So, it's not as big of issue as you might think because that dust isn't suspended. Yes, it will burn some kernels. Yes, you're going to have to deal with that a little bit, but if you cut it with a K12 saw or something along those lines, you're going to probably be okay.
How
but like
about
I said, if you want
is the farmer going to?
But no, those things can be fixed. I mean, they can order another sheet from the bin company and put the sheet right back in there, and they're good to go.
Okay.
It's not an issue. And I think, Tim, we've had it in your class that you spoke about, that we can cut holes in every sheet on that bin, and as long as we do it systematically, one side to the other side, and work our way around the bin, that bin will stay standing. As long as you don't cut the bolt patterns. If you cut inside the panel, everything is fine.
Absolutely.
But like I said, if you come down to grain level, you can pull out a whole panel at grain level. If you're just going to make one hole, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, the bin companies have said that it will stay standing, and I've seen it. It was neighboring department ended up cutting holes all the way around a bin to get a young man out that unfortunately passed away, and they had holes in virtually every panel all the way around the bin, and the bin stayed standing, and they ended up finding him. He was 3 feet from the bottom of the bin. Long story short, the bin company came in, replaced the panels they cut, bin stayed standing, and they refilled it the next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is there a vacuum tool that's available as well, or was that what you were referring to about getting the grain out from around them in the tube?
Yes,
well,
there is.
There's two different things. I'll talk about the auger, and then I'll refer to Chris after I'm done. There's a little small auger that you can stick down inside of the tube that you run with like a cordless drill. And that will auger the grain out inside of your cofferdam or rescue tube. The grain vac, I'll refer to Chris and he can talk about that.
A grain vac is just a large piece of equipment that people usually use on flat storage, something that does not have an auger in it. The only drawback to those are they can be used. They do create a lot of dust on the outside, obviously, because it's vacuuming out what's inside the bin, and they are extremely noisy. So if you want to use those, it is an option, but also be prepared for the noise and the dust level on the outside of the bin because it's going to create an environment that's going to be hard to work in.
Wow. Okay. A lot of good information there, and I know we've been going for a little bit. If you don't mind, I'd like to cover one more topic while I got you gentlemen here, and that is your training. What can we do? What do you offer? What have you seen that's available to train first responders? And Jay, would you like to start with that? What do you do for training? What do you offer? What have you seen that's worked for helping out first responders?
Tom, up here in the upper Midwest, since Tim left, there really isn't a grain bin simulator up here, but we get by real well in doing training in actual bins. And yes, they are functioning bins. They are confined spaces, and we treat them as such. But we do all kinds of different training, whether it's awareness level to just get people aware of what's going on out there, whether we're doing actual entry and doing rescue scenarios, that type of thing. There's an awful lot that can be done as far as training goes. The specifics of just getting somebody out of green can be accomplished fairly easily, in a short period of time. We like to have people for a full day so we can get into the ins and outs of confined space, ins and outs of how bins work and auger systems, etc., and actually get them in there to actually do hands-on and try some of these things out. What I would encourage too, for anybody who's listening or is going to listen to this, it's very easy to find out who in your area has these different resources that can help you out. Even if you take the grain bin training, you still are going to need some help. We just did a class up here in northwest Wisconsin last fall. 5 different departments attended with several members, and their intent is to respond as a group and help each other out. And where one department may be strong, another department might have strength in a different area, and together they're able to accomplish these complicated rescues.
Wow, very good, very good. Tim or Chris, do you have anything that you want to add on the training end of things? Sounds like a simulator is a great way to go, but Tim?
Anything. We've done a bunch of different things for departments that we brought the simulator in and done it in front of the station, and that works great because it's all controlled. I'm getting departments now that are calling back going, hey, we got, farmer so-and-so that said we could use his bin. We'd like to do the training there. And make it more real life, if you will. I don't want to use that word loosely, but real life, if you will. And so we're going to go back out without the simulator and do the training with them on an actual site. But I still want to put in stone, and I think Jay and Chris will agree with me, putting a rescue tube around someone is the easy part. It's everything else that comes around with that rescue. The rope stuff, the understanding of the bin, making sure that the power's shut off and all those things. Putting a rescue tube around an individual is easy. It's the other stuff that people have to understand. And in rural America, having someone in your mutual aid district that understands rope is huge. So, Chris?
No, yeah, like Jay and Tim said, there's a lot of different aspects to this that are pretty tough to deal with, to train on, because let's face it, real life is a whole lot different than training as far as this goes. We've done it in semi-trailers parked over the grain pit on the elevator. We fill the semi-trailer up, we put the guys up in top, sink somebody in it, open the trap on the semi-trailer, sink somebody in, and do the rescue stuff like there. Obviously, the ropes are a huge part of it. Training on, even some basic rope rescue stuff to keep the first responders that are there safe. Where to tie off, make sure everything's shut off. If you happen to have a ladder truck in your mutual aid district, would be a huge asset, for getting people up there and in a safe way. Instead of having to crawl up the side of the bin, at least they could go up the ladder and work from a platform. Things like that. It really boils down to a lot of different tasks by a lot of different people, and to keep in mind that, doing a rescue of this kind, especially if you can't see the individual, is going to take an extraordinary amount of time. You're talking, 10, 12 hours to do it the right way and treat everything in the right manner. Recoveries are tough for anybody, but you obviously want to treat it with respect that it deserves. And that's really all I can say as far as that. Get yourself in a class. We do basic rope rescue stuff, even with our department. Basic harnesses. I know I've talked to Tim many times about trying to come up with something for farmers and teaching them how to use the harnesses and make sure that it is part of the program, and make sure that they go home to their families as well, when you're messing around with grain bins or have a problem that you need to fix, because it's as important to them as it is to the rescuers.
I'll tell you,
so
you guys all opened my eyes tonight as to I always knew these were challenging calls, and I never realized how challenging they truly are, and so many nuances to it. And what a great point you made about, hey, don't forget there might have been an underlying medical emergency that led to the party falling into the grain or having a medical emergency at the top of the bin. And then even if it wasn't a medical emergency, once you get them out of the engulfment, you still got to get them down. And, there's so many, I guess the best way to describe it, there's so many moving parts. And as professional firefighters, again, listeners, if you have the potential for this type of incident in your district or neighboring district, pre-plan, think ahead, train ahead, so you're better prepared for when it happens. And I guess the best way to prevent it from happening is to educate our farmers and agricultural workers how to prevent this from happening to them. And again, what I understand is anytime there's legislation proposed or our government wants to make rules that pertain to these types of environments, it's usually overturned because there's so many miners that work in this business, and that the powers that be don't want to enact a lot of rules in that, such as no one under 18 is allowed in the bins and things like that. So, Chris, if we'll start with you, what's the awareness message that we got to get out? Okay, we're not going to be able to mandate a lot with rules and legislation because a lot of it gets overturned for many different reasons. So what can we educate our workers out there to be aware of, and what they can do to prevent it from happening to them?
Well, I think the biggest thing is don't go in. I mean, obviously that's not very practical. So the next step is to make sure you have harness and rope, that you're tied off high on the inside of the bin. If you're going to go in, make sure that you're tied off and have the proper equipment to do it safely. Like we talked before with spoiled grain, you want to check the air quality, obviously, which would be a first point before you go in. But I think the biggest safety issue is if you're going in, make sure all the equipment is off. Make sure that the grain isn't moving anymore, and then make sure you have a harness and that you're tied off inside the bin up high, so you don't become part of the problem. I think that's really the nuts and bolts of the safety of a grain bin. I mean, whether you're on top of it or you're inside it, you need to be tied off. You need to have some sort of a harness. You need to be tied off. I mean, I don't know that there's really anything else that can be said. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Make sure the equipment is off, especially if you're there by yourself. If you're not by yourself, do the same things, but have a spotter there to watch you. So if something does happen, you have somebody that can go for help. Because 9 times out of 10, especially around here in rural America, you're doing the work typically by yourself. You know, you're the one filling the truck. You're the one starting the augers. You know, it could be just a PTO shaft on the outside you get hung up in. You know, I mean, it could be a lot of different things, but just always try to have more than one person there with you while you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, words of wisdom. Very good. Tim or Jay, do you have any other things you can think of that we can get the message out not to do, or how to help themselves, prevent themselves from getting into this type of situation?
Go ahead,
Tom,
Jay.
Go ahead, Jay.
As we were talking about it here, you know, in this time where we're really having a challenge with getting groups together to do training, we're doing a lot more online type stuff, and I hope people are listening to these kind of broadcasts. Another step you can take is to go to Fire Engineering Books and Videos. There is a video, from what I understand, on grain bin rescue that this might be an opportune time for people to watch that video, because it does lay out in very well edited and produced form all the things that we're kind of talking about here tonight. I also believe that Fire Engineering has a program where you subscribe to it and you get access to these videos. So you've got access to a large portion of their library to be able to view all kinds of different training videos. And of course, the grain bin rescue is one of them that obviously I would recommend. Beyond that, trying to get people, I don't even know if educated is the right word here, but get them to buy into what Chris just mentioned and what the things that we've been talking about as far as being safe working around these bins. We're having a really hard time getting people to buy into it and understand that they've got to operate a little differently in the eyes of safety. And anytime we bring up, you know, safety training and OSHA, you know, I do a lot of OSHA training, and boy, you can see the eyes start to roll before I even get past the O. What I always do say is, you know, you can roll your eyes all you want, but if you actually follow what OSHA tells you, what their standards are, you're going to be okay. So it makes it really difficult to roll your eyes at all these different safety mandates when, if you follow those, you're not going to have a problem. So we just need to get people to take a breath and get on board with doing the right thing. I'm not 100% sure how to do that. I've been trying for a long time and continue to try. It's just a matter of getting people on board and getting more people on board who then get more people on board. You know, I tell two friends and they tell two friends and so on and so on and so on. And I imagine some of you are old enough to remember that reference.
Yep.
Copy.
Hey, Jay. Just one more.
Yes, sir.
You started bringing up the OSHA part of that thing. Those stickers are on the inside of every grain bin door, walk-in access door at the ground level on any bin that I have ever seen in my life. All those instructions, everything I just talked about, is on the door of every bin in the country.
Yep.
Yeah, that is true.
You just have to get them to read it.
People go right by them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Tim, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, it's something that I took passion in here about 3 months ago. I was talking to one of the safety directors from a local co-op down here in Nebraska, and I said to her, I think we're missing the boat. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, we're training all these firefighters and first responders and grain bin rescue, but we're not taking the message to the producer, to the farmer and rancher that's doing their thing. And she looked at me and she said, oh my goodness, why haven't we done that? I said, I don't know, but I think we should. And so fortunately, right before all of the COVID-19 stuff happened, I actually got to go to a corn producers meeting and speak, and I had a number of people walk up to me and say, "Wow, thanks for coming, appreciate it. I guess I never thought about it." And at the end of the day, I think that's the thing, which goes back to the beginning of our conversation of, we've done it this way for 100 years and nobody's got caught. Why haven't we thought about this? And
excellent point.
You know, we can teach responders how to rescue someone out of a bin all day long, but at the end of the day, I think our words, our knowledge, and our push should go to the producer and say, "Hey, you know what? If you'd put a harness on and have a rope tied off and have somebody at the door, if you're going to go in a bin, which we really like you not to, but if you have to, take the safety steps so we don't have to rescue you out of this situation," I think we're going to be further ahead in the game.
It's like fire prevention and limiting fires in houses.
It is exactly that, Tom.
I was going to say the
fire
same
prevention
thing.
on a different level. True story.
Right. Oh, that's just excellent.
And Tom,
yes, Jay.
Tom, along those lines, I've had the thought for a while, which is kind of the exact opposite of Tim. If we get people in schools, for instance, in high school, train them on these types of subjects, give them a short training session, and now we create a workforce of people who are educated and understand, I can't go inside that bin because of this, that, and the other thing, we may be able to turn that around from the other side. Both of them are extremely challenging.
Yeah,
but
I agree,
where
100%.
in the world do we start? You know, if you get a kid who comes to work at a farm and he understands the dangers of this and confined space, etc., and he says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Farmer Boss, I can't do that because of these reasons," and we create a society of people coming into the workforce who understand that, we could get it from the other side. And they're all challenging. And
maybe we'll flatten the curve, to use a popular term today.
Yeah.
Right? That is a popular term.
And that would be the good goal. And gentlemen, one more quick question, and I'll just ask you, Chris, I'm going to have you finish off with any final words of wisdom, as well as contact information if people wanted to reach out to you, if you wouldn't mind giving your email or how you'd like them to get a hold of you. But Chris, I have a question for you, and then you can finish off maybe with your contact information. And actually, all three of you, when you give me your contact information, if you have anything that we didn't cover that you want to mention, or anything we did cover that you want to reinforce, along with the answer to this question, and that simply is a quick summary of, I'm a first responder. I have silos and bins in my district. I'm called out tonight, but I'm not trained, nor do I have anyone in my department trained. What is one of the most important things I should do before the more technically savvy people get there? Chris, I'll start with you, and then you can finish off with how to get a hold of you for more information.
Okay. Well, if you're the first one on call, I would say make sure that everything is shut off. Contact somebody that knows the farm. Make sure everything's shut off. Try to establish contact with the person without entering the bin or whatever's going on, so at least you know what you're dealing with, whether they're conscious, whether you can't see them, whatever the case may be. Call your emergency manager, get them on the line. He's going to have some sort of list of individuals, or has a contact that can put him in contact with the right people to get in touch with, to know exactly how to proceed. That's really, I think, if you don't know anything, that's one thing you can do. Like I said, if they're conscious and you happen to have some sort of a rope or something that you can throw down to the individual and try and get them tied off so that they can't sink any farther. But do not enter the bin until you know exactly what's going on, or you have the right people there to help with that situation. I think is probably the biggest thing, in my opinion.
Good.
But big thing is, don't go in until you know exactly what you're doing. And if you don't know, wait till the people that get there that do. It's just what you're going to have to do. It may be painful, it'd be hard to watch, but that's what you're going to have to do. In my
Very good.
I think we've done a really good job of discussing, the kind of the ins and outs of grain bin rescue and what it's going to do, or with the things that you're going to have to accomplish, the paperwork that's involved, obviously, like Jay said, with OSHA, and the paperwork that needs to be filled out before you go into the bin, so you have a record of that kind of stuff. So I'll let Jay and those guys and Tim comment on that a little bit more. My email is Chris, CHRIS, D as in dog, MOORE @hotmail.com. If you need to get in contact with me, that'd be great. I'll answer anybody, and we'll, I guess, go on from there.
I can't thank you enough for being on tonight. Thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties at the beginning, and I'm glad we were able to bring you on, Chris. Thank you.
You bet you. Thank you, Tom.
All right, Jay, what if people wanted to get a hold of you, and if you have any final thoughts on maybe something that's important that we didn't cover or you want to reinforce?
Tom, Chris did a great job of explaining the kind of challenges you're going to run into. The only thing that I'm going to add is your incident command structure is going to be important. You're going to want to start getting assistance in place, to start assigning some of those other roles quickly so you can start to spread out the workload, because it's going to be a lot of workload. So I just would recommend starting to get your command structure in place and start splitting the load. If you want to get a hold of me, my email is jay, @exenvironmental.com. Website is xenvironmental.com, exenvironmental.com. And thanks for having me on. I thought this was great. I hope this didn't go too long for the listeners, but for my side of it, this has been a great conversation, and we could go a lot longer.
Yeah, I know we could, and we may do that. We may have a part 2, and I know it went long too, but when it's information like this, what I find is a lot of people, what they do is they listen off and on as they're working out or working in the yard or working on the farm, and they download it on a podcast on iTunes or whatever their forum is, and so I think they'll get a lot of good information out of it. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Absolutely, Jay. And Tim, you still there, buddy?
I'm here. I'm just listening in. Chris and Jay nailed it as far as if you don't know, don't go. Set your command structure up. Get your mutual aid departments coming. Get all the pieces in place before you put somebody inside of that bin. This whole thing has evolved because of great guys like Chris and Jay that have said yes and helped us build this program and get the word out there. At the end of the day, it's been, like I said earlier, it was my passion because of my farming and agriculture background, and I'm just glad that you were able to touch base and say, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like, sure. So I thank you, Tom, for inviting us. If anybody's got any questions, my email is zehendert@mpcc.edu. Please email me with questions. Be happy to answer any questions. And if you want to talk further about this, I'm all about it, because anything I can do for anyone, volunteer fire service or beyond, let me know. I'll be happy to help you out.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this. And all three of you, oh my gosh, you certainly opened my eyes as to the just the complexity of these events and the challenges and so many things I never thought of, and just the people power that is absolutely necessary. And not just that, but just the incident command structure that needs to be put in place, and the scene control, and there's just so much that goes into it. And again, as professional first responders, I guess the first thing that we have to be aware of is, if it's in our district or nearby, have a plan. 19 deaths since August of 2019. That says it right there. So, Tim, thank you so much for being here, my friend. I look forward to talking to you some more. Got some other show ideas I'd like to run by you and Chris and Jay, and get you back on at another time, because obviously there's much more to talk about.
Tom, I appreciate you offering it up, and I enjoyed it. And everybody be safe out there. Wash your hands, and we'll get through this.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Tim. What a great show. So much information for a very serious topic. 19 deaths since August of 2019. That says a lot. 19 deaths since August of 2019. 27 deaths in 2018. 370 grain entrapment emergencies in the last 10 years. Some well-documented horrible tragedies within the last few years alone, including children and young adults, fathers and sons together, and I could go on and on. It's important to be aware and try and prevent these things and these tragedies from happening, but it's just as important to know what to do as professional first responders. So I can't thank Tim Zehnder, Jay Penfield, and Chris Moore. I thank them so much. I can't thank them enough for coming on tonight and helping hopefully educate all of us just a little bit more as to what we can do to be prepared. And being prepared is one of the building blocks in the professional foundation as professional first responders. Folks, just a few other quick things. If you haven't, please check out my Facebook page, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Give it a like. I keep saying the last few months I've been saying I'm so close to 10,000 likes. I'd really like to get to 10,000 likes. I don't know. It would just mean a lot to me. Trying to get the word out on my Facebook page about what it means to be professional, giving inspirational quotes and leadership lessons and links to my articles. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as well. Please look me up, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Don't be afraid to reach out to me with comments and questions, suggestions for shows you would like me to do, or success stories in your volunteer fire department. There's 30,000 fire departments in the United States and many more in Canada and beyond, and they're successful professional operations in so many of them. I'd love to hear from you, love to hear about challenges, but also your success stories. Please reach out to me. Heck, email me personally at tamerrill, that's MERRILL 63 at AOL.com. I really, really, really would like to hear from all of you. So much is going on. I have so much more to tell you about. I'm so excited to do it. Stay tuned for more social media presence. I have a lot of things in development. Remember to wash your hands. Stay home. Take advantage of this extra time you're having with your family or in your home and in a quiet environment. Read a book, leadership-related, fire service-related. Listen to these podcasts. Go online and learn more about this great firefighting profession that we are all involved in. But take advantage of this time, because we will get through this. It's been tough. It's really been hard on some of our brothers and sisters and our family members. Some have suffered tragically, and we need to remember them and hold them in our thoughts and our prayers. So again, thanks to Fire Engineering, Chief Bobby Halton, for allowing us to do what we do and share our messages with all of you, all of us that do these podcasts on fire engineering. Check them out, especially now that you might have some extra time on your hands. My next show will be Tuesday, May 26th, and I guarantee you it'll be another great topic, and I'm hoping that we are somewhat back to normal by then. Let's hope and do our best to move forward. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, folks, stay safe, and remember that our residents are owed professional service delivered by professional firefighters representing professional organizations at all times. Thank you very much. Stay safe.